This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
You're already going.
Yeah. We're going?
Okay.
Yeah.
So raise your hand just so they know.
Okay.
All right.
So 3:35, I'll call the meeting to order? Or is that something that the chair is going to do?
No, I guess
we don't do the motion for that, huh?
3:30 on April 4th. This is a meeting of the Public Safety Committee. And it's we're here for interviews, and I'm currently a chairman, but I'm going to step down for a perceived conflict of interest. I've had dealings with some of the applicants, so I'm going to turn the chairmanship over to Christina, and looking forward to your presentation.
Okay.
Thank you and welcome. I'm Christina Madsen, Vice Chair, and will be chairing today. On behalf of this committee and the residents of Southampton, we welcome you here to present to us today. It was based on the merits of your proposal that you submitted on March 16th in response to this committee's request for qualifications that we have invited you to join us to further present the work and strengths of your firm, and we're grateful to have this opportunity. So just following your presentation, we have prepared questions that we will ask of you. And I think before handing the floor over to you, I'll just invite the committee to state names and the position that we each hold. Starting.
And you'll have to pass those microphones around so they're right in front of you when you speak.
All right. Charlie, we'll start with you.
Hi, Charlie Konecki. I'm the part-time health agent in town.
Mark Mancino, 138 Brickyard.
John O'Shea, 10 Middle Road.
Cindy Palmer, and 71 Glendale Road, and I represent seniors in town.
Ian Illingsworth, Police Chief.
Renee Groden, Select Board.
Don Warren, 230 College Highway, and I'm here on behalf of the Historic Commission.
And
thank you. So, welcome.
Thank you.
To both of you.
We are HKT Architects. We're located in Charlestown, Mass. I am Janet Slamenda. I am a principal at HKT, and I've been there for 38 years. I've been working for the firm, and
my name is Amy Dunlap. I'm also a principal at HKT, and I've been there for 22 years. And Janet and I have been working on almost all of the public safety facility projects together in that time.
So thank you once again for inviting us. We have a presentation. We encourage questions. If you have something that strikes your fancy right in the middle of it, we're also open to that. We ask you to, your question today is why would we hire HKT? And we hope to talk to you about that through the course of the presentation. First of all, it's our team. The people, our projects are led by the people you see here today. Amy and I work together on these projects, as well as other people in the office, of course. But we both have in-house public safety design experience. We work on the projects from feasibility through construction and closeout, so you will never lose sight of us as the leaders of this project. Our firm has been doing this for 47 plus years, so we have a lot of experience, and we've always been working on public municipal projects. And then our consultants, we hire our consultants based on our shared ethic of work and how they approach municipal projects. Our team is very experienced in doing that. The team for this is made up of the four of us, HKT, Park Corporation, and they'll be responsible for all the civil site engineering, structural, things like that, anything below grade or supporting the building. GGD Consulting Engineers, who does mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, and technology. And then Tortura Consulting, who are our cost estimates. And then those are the three critical pieces of a feasibility study. And we'll talk about how each one of them will work with us on it. So what is the goal of a feasibility and how will HKT get you there? So we are here to determine what you really need, what is going to support the departments, the fire department and the police department, not just from 2023, but going forward at least 20 years. You're never going to get another bite at this apple. You've got to get it right, and that's what all about needs assessment is all about, getting it right. What is it going to cost the town to support this project? Very important. Everybody knows that it costs a lot of money to construct right now. And so how are you going to present that project and get the support of your community so that they rally around the project and they move you beyond feasibility into the process of design and construction? HKT will help you answer those questions by understanding your vision for what you want for your community and then producing a well-thought-out plan for both the building, the site, and the cost for doing it. So it is a process of moving along. I just point out that all the images that you're going to see are our projects. If you want a question about anything, you can. Some of them we will point out, some we will just background imagery. So our process of a feasibility study, everybody does it differently, but we think it's a very methodical and reliable process. You know, we know how to do these things. We know how to do the steps that get you to the end point. You've laid out 8 tasks. We've shown you how we see them interacting with each other. Task 1 and 7 are simultaneously. Then there's task 2, 3, 5, and 6 are together before you get to task 4. So, for instance, when you're doing task 3, you want to know how you feel about operating costs and how you feel about the green design at the same time, or you're not going to get the process you want when you go to the development of the total project cost. So it's a methodical process, step by step by step. You do the first step, you get the first step right, you move on. You don't jump ahead to task 4. We talk about task 4 on day 1, costs, but we don't do task 4 until you know what you really want to do. So it's a very methodical process. We think it's all about our forming a partnership with you as we do this project. It's about how we communicate with you and how you communicate with your community, and it's how we collaborate and work together. A feasibility study on a public safety facility is all about us working together to understand what you want and then putting that vision into a real plan. We spend a lot of time listening to you as you talk about your project early on. Before we put pen to paper, we want to hear what you think. We know that in a visioning session, which is the very first meeting we have, people on a committee, some people speak louder than others, and that's natural, and nothing's wrong with that, but we do them as a written thing and as a talking part so that everybody gets to be heard equally. So we think that's really important. And then our design team works together in a partnership so that we make sure that the plans we're presenting you, the ideas we're developing are realistic, that we've thought through the constraints of the sites or the activities that we're going to do, and that the ideas are proactive, that we don't get you excited about a project or possibility that's not realistic. So we really work together with you and with our consultants in that partnership. So we talked a little about the visioning session, and we think that's really important. We're defining your goals and your project objectives and your key success factors for your project during that visioning. We talk about how it's going to impact your community. We talk about how your committee is going to engage with the community, because you want to really be able to move forward from feasibility into construction. So we encourage a very transparent and open process. The last thing we want to hear at town meeting is, I never heard about that project. And we hear it at every town meeting I go to, and I do a lot of them. We don't want to get that with you. We want to reach your community so they understand why you're doing what you're doing, and you can back up every single thing you do with fact. And then that the final design responds to the police and fire department needs. If we miss the boat on that, we haven't solved a problem and we haven't met their needs, and it's going to be a disappointment to everybody along. So we talk about a project being a continuous conversation. It's, we start talking about it and we continue talking about it right to the end. We keep adjusting and making it be the best project it can be. And then we talk about collaboration and smart decision making along the way. During the needs assessment, we're going to talk about best practice with your department's unique needs. Every police and fire department operate differently across the Commonwealth, period. There's no two communities that we've seen that work exactly the same. There are a lot of things they do that are similar, but how they want to operate, what's best for the town of Southampton has to be heard from them, and so that we can take that vision and put it into the reality of the plan. How the site layout work, so that the movement of the emergency vehicles on and off the sites is safe and is operationally sound. We got confused coming into this building, to the parking lot, because we went across the apron of the fire department, sort of, and we were kind of like, ooh, that's never really allowed in other towns. So we kind of wondered about that. We thought maybe we came in the wrong way, but it's really important. Same with the interior of the plan, two departments coming together for the first time, perhaps. How do they share the building? How do they share spaces? Police departments are much more secure. Fire departments tend to be more open. The community comes in all the time. Kids coming in to touch the tracks and all that kind of stuff. How does that work? How do they join forces to come together? How will the elevations reflect the consensus of this committee in your community? We look at local architecture. We look at photo surveys of the town. We hear from you. Some people say, I don't care what it looks like. I want the cheapest design. What is the cheapest way to build the building? Because that's what we're going to be able to sell. It's a lot of conversation that happens about the architecture. Building systems, a really important part of conversation. How's this town going to support modern mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection systems? They are a new thing for many people that controls everything, and we have those conversations early on. And then, of course, sustainability goals are really important in communities. First cost, long-term cost, fossil fuel free to anything in between, and we have a lot of experience doing that. And then Amy's going to take over and give some examples.
So Janet was talking a little bit about the collaboration process that we go through both with our engineers and with our clients, and we thought we'd give you a few examples of some recent projects to get an idea of how we work and some of the challenges that we encountered on them and how we worked through it. So the first one I wanted to talk to you about is the Ashland Public Safety Building. This is a project that we started with a site selection and feasibility study. The town was interested primarily in two sites in town, and very quickly one of the sites, it was apparent, was everyone's preferred site for a whole lot of reasons, but there were a lot of complications, not the least of which was that they didn't own the site, and they had a gentleman who owned it who was willing to donate it with some strings attached. So we worked with the community to get through that process of negotiating and get the site that they wanted. They were bringing both the police department and fire department to this site. The site had significant issues, which I'll show you here. There was a change in topography across the site of about 35 feet from front to back. It was a small parcel located in a hillside. We knew there was going to be blasting required, so we worked with our geotechnical engineers and our civil engineers to define a system of subsurface explorations. We did about 26 rock probes where they put probes down in the ground to try to determine where the rock is. We did borings, we did test pits. In the end, that allowed us to do a 3D model of what the ledge looked like below grade, and that really helped us in siting the building. At the same time, we were doing a traffic analysis. In the plan, in the upper right-hand corner, the first one, you see a little orange triangle out in the street, and that's where three roads came together. And after doing the traffic analysis, it was determined that that was really the only safe place for apparatus to leave the site. And then at the same time, we had wetland scientists doing the flagging, and all the blue you see up there are wetlands located all around the site. So we had these three pieces of civil issues that we had to deal with, and we worked really closely with the wetland scientists, the geotechnical engineer, and the civil engineer while we were doing our initial planning and putting the plan together to figure out how to site this building so that we could have safe movement onto the site, how we could minimize the blasting and the costs associated with that, and we could have minimal impacts to the wetlands so that we didn't have to do a lot of costly replication. So it really was a very collaborative effort to get this all worked through. And at the same time, we were trying to come up with a design that would work for the departments. And this department was particularly interested in the fire department in having a separation of hot and cold zones and making sure that firefighter safety was taken into consideration as we were laying out the spaces around the apparatus bay. So we worked through all of that and then also investigated sustainability. They were questioning whether they wanted to go for LEED certification. We did a little sustainability study, determined that LEED certification probably wasn't in the cards within their budget, but there were a lot of sustainable features that we could wrap into the project, and we did, including some photovoltaics, some green roofs, and some electric charging stations. This is the Tisbury Emergency Services Facility. It's a fire station located on Martha's Vineyard. From the date we got the project, we had 5 months to do all of the programming, to do all of the design, and to have a bid in hand to go to town meeting. Not an ideal schedule by any stretch of the imagination, but it was what it was, and so we worked with them. They had a very tight budget, and after we did the programming, it was pretty apparent that they couldn't afford everything that they were asking for, so we did some quick cost analysis to reduce the budget and get the design back on track, which we did. There was also a challenging site here. I'm not sure there are any good sites left for public projects in the state of Massachusetts. But this site was a deep linear one you can see there, and in the back of the site were the town leaching fields. So we had to stay away from those, and we had to relocate some underground infrastructure that was leading to those fields in order to get the building built. And that was a little bit tricky because we had to keep it operational while we did the relocation. But we got the whole thing built. We did include some sustainable features as well as a training tower. They didn't have the space for a standalone training tower, but we incorporated some of those features into the egress stair in the building and the mezzanine spaces in the apparatus bays. This is the Salisbury Police Station, another very complicated site. There was wetlands surrounding the site, you can see in blue. There was a water tank for the community. There were community gardens on the site. Lots of things that still needed to remain once construction was done. And the elevation of the topography was an issue for flooding. So we had to raise up the site in order to get out of the floodplain. In order to get everything to fit, we had to look at doing a 3-story structure. This was the initial plan that we ran by them, and it just was too tight. And so we looked at how we could compress the floor plan and stretch it out into 3 stories to get it all to fit. There were definite operational compromises that had to happen, but that's what had to happen to get it to work on the site. And you can see there are 3 stories there. And then we did a lot of looking at the elevations and the massing to get something that would fit in with their community architecture with some of the other public buildings that they had in town that they really respected and liked. And you can see this was the final result. We have some images of some of the interior spaces. We were really sensitive to some of the programmatic requests that they had. They wanted a dispatch that would have natural light, so we had to configure it in a way that they could get windows and access to natural light, but still protect the privacy, everything that was showing up on the monitors. They really hoped to have some vehicle storage and garages. That was not in the budget, but we worked with them to get a carport in lieu of an enclosed garage space. And most notably, this is a small community, but it's a community with real seasonal surges in the summer. It's right at the beach, and they can have some characters coming through their town in the summer. So they needed 7 cells to deal with peak summer requirements, which put them in a whole different code category than most smaller public safety buildings are in. And that had implications for structure, for fire rating, for smoke separations that we worked through with them in the design. So moving to your project, Janet talked a little bit about the process that we go through to get you where you need to go. The most important thing, as she said, is really programming and defining what your needs are. We're going to be looking at the industry trends and industry best practices, but as she said, everyone, every fire department, every police department that we've encountered in Massachusetts operates a little bit differently. So it's really important for us to get out in the field with you, to get into your building, to talk to people, to see how you operate now, to see what works and what doesn't work, and how we can modify that moving forward into the future. We're going to, at the same time, be looking at sites. We understand you've got 4 sites that you're interested in looking at, and you've done a little bit of preliminary investigation on some of them for other uses. What people might have been looking at on those sites for other uses might be a little different from what we're looking at for a public safety facility. So we're going to want to look at the data that you've got, analyze it, and figure out where the gaps are, what do we need to supplement in order to get the information that we need to see whether or not it's really feasible for public safety. And some of the things we're going to be looking at: zoning, topography, utilities, neighbors, permitting issues that might be involved there, and then traffic and how we get people safely onto and off of the site. Once we have that information in hand, we'll move on to conceptual alternatives. We don't do cookie cutter architecture. Every project that we do looks different, and it's really in response to what we hear from you, both operationally, how the plan lays out. It's important to know how your operations work and whether this is going to work for you now and in the future. And then in terms of the architecture and what the outside of the building looks like. In the end, we want this to be a source of civic pride for the people of Southampton. This should mesh with your community. It should reflect your values, and it should be aesthetically pleasing. So we'll work with you to figure out what that means. All of our buildings look different, and it's all a function of what we hear from the community and how it's going to fit. From there, we move on to the professional cost estimate, which Janet's going to talk about in a little bit, and also marketing the project, which she will also talk about. One of the things you talked about in your RFQ was life cycle cost. Life cycle cost is typically done at a later stage of design because there's quite a bit of engineering that really needs to be done before you can nail down those costs. We need to know what the wall section is going to look like. What are the materials going to be? How much insulation is going to be in those walls? What are the systems going to be? What kind of controls are going to be on the systems? Those are all things that tend to be done later in design, but if it's something that's important to your community now, we can definitely dive in and we can try to get that information and get those answers for you. We would have the engineers meet with the facilities department, talk about what you have in buildings right now, what works and what doesn't work. Sometimes we hear from communities, we only use this type of boiler, and we have an agreement with the service company that services them. And we say, okay, so we'll work from that. Other companies or other communities say, the systems that run these HVAC systems are so complicated, we really want simple controls, and we work with you on that. But whatever you need, we work through that with your facilities people and whoever's going to be operating the systems to make sure that it makes sense for you. We will also be looking at sustainable options. There are lots of different things that we can incorporate into a public safety building. These are just a few of the things that we could consider, and we've done all of these for our buildings in the past. So anything from solar PV arrays to rainwater harvesting to geothermal, it's all on the table as we move through. These are some images of some sustainable projects that we've done, just to give you an idea of some of the more unusual ones, or ones where we really look for opportunities where there are constraints. So like in the lower right-hand corner there, that's the Charlestown Police Station, and that red linear louvered element that you see on the facade there, that's called a transpired solar collector. It's a corrugated metal wall panel that has an airspace behind it. The sun beats down on the metal, heats up the air behind it, and then the HVAC system pulls in that preheated air, and you get some free heating as a result of it. That came about by looking at the orientation of the site. That actually is the sort of the back facade. It faces the parking area. It also happens to be the southern facade, and it happens to back up to detention cells and locker rooms, and they were places that didn't necessarily need or were able to have natural light. And so we had this big solid wall, and we said, what can we do? Here's an opportunity to incorporate a sustainable feature in it. So let Janet move on.
Exciting things for the cost. It's, one of the most important things to talk about early on. Costs have risen significantly during the pandemic. Escalation has risen significantly during the pandemic, and it hasn't slowed down. It's about 8% a year right now in this area of Massachusetts, which is 4% is a typical one. So as hard as those conversations are, we like to share them with you early on because it does affect the way projects work. So we're always looking for ways to control the cost early on in the design process. Starting in that first meeting when we talk about it, preventing scope creep. Some people always say, just can't we make that room like 10 feet bigger? And then we transfer that 10 feet into costs, and then people begin to understand what that means. So presenting that, determining how the selection of the site, the siting of the buildings, the materials and systems affect cost. Some people want to spend more money up front on mechanical systems because they're going to spend less in the future. And that's really important. Decide early on, and that's sometimes for communities the only way to go. They feel that is the best thing. They have to operate these buildings going forward. So all of those things. And then we can obviously discuss Chapter 149 or 149A, which is CM at risk. If you have an extremely complicated site or something, you might want to go with CM at risk, which is an alternate course in Massachusetts to bidding. Although, for a new building on a site, it's usually not required. So, but we have done many of them. So if you need to take that route, we can do it. We have a professional cost estimator, Jerry Tortora, who's TCI. We've been working with him for more than 15 years. He does all municipal projects, police, fire, public works, town halls, anything like that. He's very in tune to what's going on. He loves to talk about cost. He's, right now, he keeps saying to me, my crystal ball is rather cloudy, though, because everything has been so up in the air right now. He's been talking to me a lot about midpoint of construction. With the way you estimate a project now is you used to do $2,023, estimate your bid date, halfway into construction. That was a good solid number. Is that going to work for you? We do. And times when escalation is low, you don't have to do that. The bid you get is the number that they're going to carry on through the project. So we work really hard with our estimator to do that. Then there are hard and soft costs. We'll work with Ed and the committee on the soft costs of construction, which is about 30% of your total project cost for a project, 70% construction, 30%. Those are average numbers. So to build a project that your community can understand and get that cost, you need to look at the whole picture for them. Early on, we use historical cost data to when we're first talking to you, we get from Jerry what he's seeing numbers, and we use those so, we can instantly tell you what we think the bids could come in before we've done a whole lot of work. And then, we're going to work with you on that entire picture. You've seen that graph before. If you make good decisions early on, the costs are, and the changes later are easier to deal with. So that's really important. And it's all tied in, to us planning hard with you about the total project cost for the project and staying true to your budget in this town. The other thing we're going to help you with, and we think is really important, is that getting the public to support the project. This will be, assume this is going to be a big project for the town. There is no doubt. And so you want to know who's going to champion your project for this town. You have to have those people that are going to be out there supporting this project from the day one. In some towns, we've helped, particularly the chiefs. We help them have a little pack and go PowerPoint presentation, if they are inclined to do that. So when they get in front of somebody and somebody asking questions, they can show them something, and those are really helpful. We encourage you to also know who supports the project, and particularly those who are not going to support the project, because then you can work on them to help them understand why you're doing it. So you really want to know both your supporters and the people that are against the project. And how do you inform and educate? There's so many different ways to do it, but you want to make sure you answer every question that's asked of you. You don't want to avoid answering a question ever, because then it builds bad, feelings for the project. So there's a lot of things: websites, social media, YouTube, brochures, visual displays, newspaper articles, cable TV. There's all kinds of ways to get into community. Most communities now build a particular website for their project as a source of making sure people are seeing the project as it's moving along. So whatever it is, we can help you put the right information out there. And then, of course, preparing you and town officials to make the case for the preferred solution. People don't mind hearing from me and Amy at presentations, but they really want to hear from the people in the community. They want to hear from the chiefs. They want to hear from the town administrator and financial folks, and we want to prepare you to be ready to answer those questions and be confident that you know the right answers. So we constantly try to make our presentations so that you can use that information provided as you move along through the process. Finally, why HKT? We talked about partnering, communication, and collaboration being very important to us and our clients. We believe we have the expertise and the right team to look at your program and your problem creatively and arrive at the best solution. If you've talked to any of our references, I hope they tell you that we've helped them in meeting their goals and addressing their concerns. We also very much believe in architecture. We are architects with a capital A at the firm, so it's really important that the project is successful for you and looks good and is the source of Amy said civic pride, and I balance that out. That's really important. And we also believe that together as a team, you and us, we can achieve that design. It will be functional, it will be within your budget, and we think it will be a great source of public architecture for your community. This last slide is just our closing slide. We love this very simple quote from Stephen Gardner, who was an architect and a teacher and a philosopher. He did everything to support his career as an architect. He taught, he wrote books, he did everything. But it was a very simple, good buildings come from good people and all problems are solved by good design. We really looked to that as a good quote. We believe that those are all projects from beginning to end. You got to start somewhere underground, steel construction going up and result buildings. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you.
Perfect time, half hour.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation. Now, we are going to proceed with prepared questions. We want the questions to be uniform between the different applicants so that nobody gets the advantage in that. Now, as to posing these questions, different committee members sent them in to the chair. How shall we go about asking the questions? Shall I just read them, or would the people who wrote the questions like to ask?
You could read them.
Why don't you read them?
Yeah.
All right. Changing glasses.
Some of them do overlap a little bit, so there might be a little bit of redundancy, but we'll see.
All right. So the first question is, how often would you expect to meet with the Public Safety Building Committee during the feasibility study? And how many site visits for land assessment, public meeting, community forum? So just please give us a sense of how participatory you plan to be.
Right. I'm pulling out the schedule that we included in the proposal because we did think through this a little bit about how we would structure meetings and all. Look on the flies. And part of this is a dialogue with you. If we're fortunate enough to get the project and we meet with you to talk a little bit more about it as part of the negotiations and really narrow down what the scope is going to be. This is going to be part of the discussion about what the process is like. How many community meetings do you think we should be going to? Are there lots of different public groups, or do you imagine that we'll be preparing you to go to some of these public meetings, or would some of these be virtual? These are all conversations that we're going to be having. But I think one of the most important things is the kickoff meeting as we get started to flesh out some of those things. We'll certainly be having programming meetings with the police and fire departments, which usually we can do in a day, where we come out here and it's a long day meeting with them, but we get that done. And then we would come back to the committee and present the findings of that. And we might have some more edits to that and then come back for a virtual meeting or something. Certainly the site evaluations, we would be presenting those to you, what our findings were for the site. And then during design, I think we would do a round of design options, come and meet with you. We'd do some revisions, come and meet with you again. And then I think we talked about having 3 different rounds for design options. And then we would meet with you to present the cost estimate. And then really it comes down to what the public presentations would be like and what makes sense for your community. I think that's, and certainly, I think it's really important to note that it needs to be a discussion exactly what you want the scope to be and how we're going to work that out. We all got very comfortable during the pandemic with virtual meetings, certainly, and it's made it so easy for us to communicate with our engineers and with our clients, to just hop on a call. If it happens all the time that somebody calls us up and they say, I'm looking at the plan and I've got some questions, and we say, hold on, I'm going to send you a meeting invite, and we hop on a call together and we are able to point to things together and have a real discussion. So that's always an opportunity and something that can be worked out moving forward. So,
Thank you. Are there follow-up questions to that?
No?
Okay. What steps will you take to determine the best size and design for a public safety building in Southampton?
the best size and design.
Size and design, yes.
Okay. Yeah, size and design. So that gets back to the programming. I think the most important part of a project is the programming phase, because we're going to be meet with the people that they are going to describe. And one thing we don't let people do is tell us how big they want the space to be, because that's our job, and we know it, and we know what it means to build these buildings. We also aren't afraid to say no to people when they're asking for things that aren't supportable to a community. We know what happens. So during program, we're going to come up with the size of the building, and we're going to put it in front of you. Amy talked about it. You're going to see that, and you're going to prove it. We have had communities that has asked us to sit in a meeting and go through it, space one by one by one by one. We have done that, and we will do that if you need it. But most likely what's going to happen is that we're going to produce a programming document that the chiefs and whoever, the representative and whoever wants to be involved are going to pour over it and ask us questions back and forth, and we're going to keep revising that until we get to a number. We're going to be talking about historic cost numbers at the same time. So some of those tricky spaces, like should we get a space for 300 here, or should we get a space for 50 here? Whatever, is you're going to be able to translate that somehow into money. So that's really important. What was the second part of your question? So that's all about programming and site size, how you get to the building size.
Size and design.
Yeah, so that's how you get to the building size. Now, Amy pointed out a couple options. We've had a couple really vertical buildings lately. We can go back and I'll try to look for them, but we found that we've been doing a couple three-story buildings recently for public safety, which is kind of unusual, but we found that there's some efficiency in a tight plan. There has been some sites that have required it more likely, so there would be some conversation with you about that, if that would make the most sense for you. Let me see if I can get to a three-story. We're getting to, this is a three-story plan. There's a third story there. It's not super populated at the moment, but that tight plan allowed for them to do things on the site and in the building and in a slightly smaller footprint. I will point to, go back to Ashland, and Ashland is a three-story building as well. Part of that was due to the site to get the program in, but it made for a tighter, more efficient plan, and so we're building less roofs, less foundations. That's part of the conversation. This was built on site. The back end of this building is deep into the hillside. So when you're in the back of the site, you're up actually on the second floor. So this was site-driven, but we've done that. And the last one is this building, which we didn't really talk about, but this is, you see the site on the top corner, we call it the pork chop site in our office, affectionately known as. It has no parking on site, as you can see. There's not a single space to put a vehicle on this site. So they had to rent or lease a site next door from a bank for 100 years or something like that, so they could actually park vehicles on. But this is a fire station, and because of that tight site and the road leading out to the street, we also had to build a three-story building. So again, smaller footprint, a little less foundations, a little less roof. It can be an efficient plan. So all of those could work for you. And we just point them out that all of those things get part of the conversation. So, okay.
Terrific, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, please.
Is it okay? So you spoke about vertical design and how it's getting more and more prevalent or necessary.
It's happening.
Does that add to the cost? Because you have to, I assume there's elevators in those buildings.
Yep, and it costs another, what's an elevator stop cost now? 50?
Oh, it's a little more, 75,000
a stop maybe nowadays. So yeah, you're paying a little bit for that, and the run of the stairs have to, but less concrete, less roof, less.
So there's like a trade-off in the cost?
There's a trade-off.
Okay.
And so, we've seen it because of sites, but we've also, seen it because it has happened to make sense. A lot of people ask us, is it better to build a flat roof building or a pitch roof building? This is New England, it has to be a pitched roof. Not so. And it's actually split right down the middle. We did this study for a town, and 50% of buildings, fire and police and public buildings have pitched roofs, and about 50% don't. And they actually are less costly to build a flat roof building than a pitched roof building, just so you know. So a lot of towns have made a decision to go flat because it's cheaper to build. Another decision we can help you make. So this building potentially was cheaper than the pitched roof of the police station I showed. So all kinds of things go into making those choices and decisions along the way. So,
any other follow-up questions?
How much maintenance is there on a flat roof? And is there much, like, scuppers and those kinds of things? I always hear about collapse, honestly.
I mean, the collapse, I think a lot of times we hear about pre-engineered buildings having issues, and those are, usually you're hiring a metal building company to come in, and they are engineering every last piece of steel out of that building, so there's no room for tolerances, and then there are issues for that. When we're talking about conventional stick-built, there's certainly a safety factor built in with the engineers who are working on it, so we don't have those problems.
There's not a major considerable cost that gets added into the project for maintenance kind of issues?
For maintenance, no. I mean, we certainly, we're designing with roof drains and with overflow scuppers or overflow drains to handle the weight. You do have to occasionally go up and make sure that the roof drains are clear. But, there are definitely maintenance issues with any pitched roof as well. You have to make sure if the shingles get blown off in the wind that they get replaced. You have to make sure your flashing is in good condition. If you have gutters, you have to make sure those are clear. So, any building that you build is not going to be maintenance free. We're going to try to balance, your maintenance abilities with whatever systems that we select.
Doesn't add excessively to it.
Yeah.
Actually, some of the green roofs we're putting on actually protect the roofs underneath. And they do. The mic. Oh, sorry. They collect water, through the green. They provide insulation, and they protect the roofing material underneath. They have a lot of dual benefits. So we found that, it's good environmentally, but it also has other good factors for protecting those roofs. But again, what Amy said about buildings they don't take care of themselves. You build them, you can't walk away. We know that from our house. I have a 140-year-old house with slate roof. I know what it's the pain of every season. So
our town administrator does most of our cleaning duties for us.
Yeah, we've had some. We do pre-engineered buildings partly as part of our projects. We've done plenty of them, and we know the difference. We had a pre-engineered building. We were building next to a pre-engineered building for a town. They had one, and we were building next. And right before, there was a big storm, and the weight was so much, it punched through the roof and pushed the framing through the acoustic tile ceilings.
I guess I mostly ask because we don't really have any kind of maintenance department, and it does, often does fall on town administrator. They climb up on a roof, and I've done it with them to check things out. So just wondered how.
The one other thing is it's Massachusetts public law, so the lowest responsible bidder is the bidder on all roofs in Massachusetts, and sadly that enters into the conversation as well. So we work really hard in CA to make sure that inspections are done during the construction of those roofs, which we call for in our specs, and we make sure, and of course the insurance companies have to come in and insure them. So there's a lot of protections built into how they're also constructed, if that's any help.
So that does help because it's important as longevity. Thank you.
Now, we need to be mindful of the time. The next question you have answered very nicely with it is, can you give an example of a public safety complex you designed for a town, and what was the most important part of the process for generating public support? I think because we have a list and our time is short, we can pass over that. Agreed? Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then once selected, if you are the chosen firm, what is the Public Safety Building Committee expected to provide to you for the first meeting?
For the first meeting?
First meeting?
Yeah, for the first meeting, I don't know that, other than, your thoughts on the project, your willingness to share as much information as you've got, and schedule, and talk about schedule and certainly future commitments. Knowing a little bit more about your timeline, what your goals are for that, that would be important, so that we can nail down that schedule and figure out what our deliverable dates need to be. But
I mean, you are our partner, but it's really that you attend the meetings either virtually or actually read the data we provide, ask as many questions as you want. The more questions, that we're happy to take more questions rather than less questions, so that when you get, because we're going to ask you to sign off on each phase. We're not going to move from one step to another before you as a committee agree that this is the program, or this is the site, or this is whatever. So your participation is really the most important thing that we see out of our clients.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, several other questions you have answered nicely already, and then so that I'll move to this one. Discuss examples of past projects where a rural community had to vacate a fire station or a police station, and the public wanted answers to what would happen to the old structure, assuming the new public safety building was proposed for a new location.
That's a tough one. We're trying to think of projects. So we had a project where we had to keep. We had a project where we had to keep a station. We've had a couple of projects where we've had to keep a building in place and build and then tear it down. And people wanted to know, why can't we just add on to something? We hear that a lot, and usually that, we can show, like, fire trucks, the apparatus bays are really big issues, the old apparatus bays and new apparatus bays are not the same things. The trucks don't fit, or you have to spend a lot of money to get a special truck to get into a door or something like that. So we get a lot of those questions, and we can, through the process of programming and planning and conversation with the community, we can answer those questions. We've had to move buildings.
We've seen towns use the buildings for swing space for other projects that are going on. I'm thinking about Tewksbury. That's what they are doing. They have a school administration project. They moved the administration people out as soon as the fire department got out. In Ashland, they're moving from 2 fire stations into the new public safety building. One of them they are looking to sell. It's right downtown. It's a little historic building. They're thinking of turning it to a restaurant or something like that. And the other one, the DPW might be using. So there are lots of different ways that communities handle it.
I think historic structures are the hardest ones. If someone's really, there's something about the building that is so significant to someone, it's the hardest thing. We took one building down for a fire station, and what we did was we collected all the wood inside, the flooring and the beadboard and all that, and we used it in the lobby to transition it. But the building itself was completely falling down or was not appropriate anymore. And it's a hard conversation to have with your community, but that's why you start early and you do it quickly. So,
would this committee be in agreement that really the questions or the answers to the questions have already been answered for the remaining? And please speak up, except for the last one, which I want to leave sufficient time for.
The one they got ahead of time? That one?
Yeah.
I think most of them have been answered.
Yeah.
Yes, your presentation was very comprehensive.
Yeah.
Thank you. So finally, the question that you have had ahead of time, and that is, what is your anticipated fee range for the feasibility study?
So I think, Ed, I assume you shared my thing? Yes. So a project like this, by state law, requires you make a selection based on qualifications, not cost. So you do know that. I'm sure you've been told that. We looked at it, though, and we looked at the numbers you had. You have a very extensive wish list of tasks to do. And I think some of them are absolutely critical to getting to their endpoint, and some of them are not so critical. And so we would work with you during that period of time when we're talking to you about the project to really dig down deep and find out why you put that into your proposal. Why did you think that was so important? And then we can give you the cost of that. Like, I don't want to short-term change my civil engineers from doing the work they do, because the site work is so important for them to do borings, geotechnical borings at this point, or something like that. I'd rather them do design work. Same with our cost estimator. We want him to do a really good job doing a cost estimate. We don't want him to cut things. So, we want you to spend your money wisely. So if you tell us you have X dollars, $85,000, I think was the number in the RP, we'll tell you what you can get, and that you will get to the solution. You will get a solution that you can sell to your town with it. You might not do all the bells and whistles. If you tell us you want to do everything on that list, we can tell you what the cost of each one of those elements could cost. And then you can pick and choose based on conversation. Amy, do you want to?
I think that's...
Yeah, so I don't know if that helps you, but it is a very hard question for a committee to grapple with. What does this cost to do this work? We feel like we're putting so much money in and we don't have anything at the end, or something like that. And I think it's really important to know what you need to get the thing done. Don't shortchange your programming session. Don't shortchange your cost estimate. Don't shortchange your civil engineer. Don't shortchange taking time to develop the right program and the right plan, because all of those work together to develop the right plan for the right site and give you the information you need. And there's a lot of other things that you can do in the next phase. And all of them need to be done eventually, but they don't need to be done in a feasibility study. They need to be done in phases that go after that: schematic design, design development. When Amy talked about operating cost, that's a perfect one that we can give you a range. Like, we can tell you a range of things, but the details of it, if you really need the details, well, we need to do schematic design, and then we need to do those next levels in order to get you a real number. And I want to make it up for you. We want to give you the real things.
So what you're saying is that you will break it down,
yes,
in cost,
absolutely,
so that we as a committee will have the opportunity to factor in how much money we have to spend and
absolutely,
choose the best feasibility study that
absolutely,
can be
absolutely,
produced for us.
I think we're not trying to be evasive with the question, but I think there's so much discussion that goes into the fee negotiation, and it really is learning a lot about your project and your community through all of that. I mean, if you tell us that the community is all behind this project, you're really only going to have to put together one public presentation and plan on standing up at town meeting. That's one thing. If you say that there's so much opposition, and we're going to want you to go to the Concom and the Historical Committee, and we're going to want you to go to the school department and present in front of them, I mean, that's a very different scope of work that we're going to need to take into account. So we really have to have that conversation with you to really get a better understanding of what this feasibility study means to your community and what's going to work for you to get the project through from beginning to end. So I think meeting with you, understanding all that better, putting together a menu, having some transparency so that we can have some discussion. You can pick and choose what works with your budget. We're happy to work with you and get something that will work for you.
Follow-up questions to that?
Fair answer.
Yeah, very fair answer. Yes.
All right. I had one time where I had to do 25 public meetings. That's a real thing. I had everybody from the street committee to the tree committee to the sign committee to the League of Women Voters to conservation. They were all purposeful, meaningful meetings, but still 25 meetings and 25 presentations we had to put together. And that's what Amy was talking about, so just so you know, it can happen. It does happen sometimes.
I have a last question.
That's a lot.
No, so Cindy has one more question.
And you probably have answered it, but I sometimes think when people are asked to give a presentation, sometimes they wish they could ask the committee a question. Now, that's different than your first meeting or that. Is there any question you would have for us at this moment?
I'm most interested in what your community thinks about this project, because that's what Amy and I always talk. We were talking about, you have 6,000 under 2,000 households in town, 6,500 people. We look at all that stuff. What is it, what does it make up of a town? We know how difficult it is this whole time. So we always like to know when we're starting, even before, is what's your community think about this project? So that's the one thing, because we've been doing this a long time. I know how to do program design. I know how to do all the pieces, but those subtleties of that are so important to us. So that's a big question I'd always love to know. Where are you?
It's probably 50/50. 50/50? Yeah, that it's, there's certainly some people for it, there's some people that...
Let the chief have your microphone.
Sure.
Oh.
Please, thank you.
Sorry about that. Probably about 50/50. I mean, there's a good amount of the population that are behind it, and then there's a good amount of population that really doesn't want to see taxes go up. Certainly, both are valid concerns. We've gone this route one other time, and the costs were higher than they were ready to go with. And we know the building costs have gone up. So we know we're going to have some challenges. We're going to need to really, have some good preparation. Communication to the community is going to be very important to us. Hopefully we don't have to have 25 additional meetings, but we are going to be probably looking for some guidance and some, going forward as to really selling it and making sure that we reach out to all of the different parties within the community.
And that we also have another big project before us, and that's a new senior center.
Oh, yeah,
and
right.
This is a parallel process right now. Parallel, looking at the same sites.
Same land, same schedule. Have they started it?
I can speak to that because I'm on the committee. The study is just about completed. A lot of the sites are similar between the two structures, and the company that was hired is Abacus, Architects and Planners, and they had 3 meetings, not 25, and they did an excellent job with the public meetings, and most of our meetings were virtual.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But I just wanted to turn it over to the other chief to answer the question you asked.
Sure. Relative to the community's interest, I think everyone in the community recognizes the need. It's really going to come down to costs.
Yeah. Costs are frightening right now. I mean, if you've already gone through much of a feasibility study, you already got some cost already, I'm sure.
Yeah. We're at the point of voting tomorrow or Thursday on the preferred site, and we also have the advantage of a donation. A gentleman that made a significant donation of funds, so it's certainly not going to cover the entire project, but it definitely is a jump start.
Right. But costs are high right now, so we're just working with everybody to try to make it happen for people, and put the right information out there.
Yeah.
So
I agree with Chief Illingsworth here about I think people support the project. I really do. Fire station is an 1850 building, and the police are in a turn-of-the-century building. I think there's no question that we need it. I think it comes down to the money, and I think the last time the Ashland reminded me a lot of what the committee went through, the geotechnical stuff in terms of ledge and the price tag and all of that. So we're hoping to overcome that and get the public support for the project and have it, be something that's supported by the town.
Right. I think that due diligence work early on is so critical, because when we went into bidding, we knew there was a lot of blasting, 35 feet of blasting we were taking out. But we were almost within the penny. I mean, we knew it was going to cost, but because we had done so much work beforehand to be right about that, it wasn't a surprise. So that's the due diligence. And it's the same team, by the way, same design team. So, yeah. Anything else?
All right. Well, it being 4:30, if there are no other questions, we will just thank you wholeheartedly for this presentation.
Thank you.
And we will be in touch.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome. Should we shut down?
Is your PIN 25 mean you've been 25 years in the force?
No, that's my ID.
Oh, your ID?
Yeah.
Oh, everybody has an ID?
Yes.
We'll pause now for a break.
Recess?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's on people's badges. but
Yeah.
On the motion for a 10-minute
Oh, do
recess?
we need a motion to recess? May I have that motion to recess for 25 minutes?
That's the way to do
I
it.
move to have a 10-minute recess.
Second.
10 minutes. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Can I use the playground?
All right. Nope, not on yet.
I was checking that time is consistent with... There it is.
There we go. We'll reconvene the meeting of the Public Safety Committee. I'm Christina Madsen, Vice Chair of this committee, sitting in tonight for Mark Darnold. Welcome. The Public Safety Building Committee and the residents of Southampton welcome you to Southampton. It was based on the proposal you submitted on March 16th in response to our request for qualifications that we've invited you here tonight to present in person and to further describe your work and the strengths of your firm. And we look forward to hearing your presentation tonight. So after the presentation, we will take a few minutes to ask you some I will read prepared questions that have been that are consistent with the questions we've asked the other respondents, and then then we'll conclude the meeting. But before we hand the floor over to you, we'll invite the committee just to introduce themselves and state their position on the committee. Charlie, starting with you.
Use your mic.
Hi, Charlie Konecki. I'm a member at large for the committee.
Mark Mancino, a member at large.
John O'Shea, member at large.
Cindy Palmer, representing seniors.
And I'm Christina Madsen, at-large member and vice chair.
John Workman, Fire Chief.
Ian Illingsworth, Police Chief.
Rainey Groden, Select Board.
Don Warren, representing the Historical Commission.
And Ed Gibson, Town Administrator, ex officio, non-voting member.
Thank you. So, gentlemen.
I'll do introductions for Kayla and Beanick. We're happy to be here tonight. Again, good to see you. My name's Curtis Edgen. I'm principal over here.
Use the mic, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Curtis Edgen, principal in charge, Kayla and Beanick. With me today are two of my partners. I'll let you talk later. Jim Hannafin, one of my partners, and John McMillan. So these are the folks that you will be interacting with throughout the process, the three of us, and different roles at different points of the project. So just want us to roll from here?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Proceed. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, we're excited to be back. It's been almost 9 years, 8+, somewhere in between, since we were here looking at this last. And I'm not going to bore you with a lot of pictures up front of things that are already in our submittal that we provided to you. There's a lot of information there, but we're just going to breeze through a little bit of a background for those of you who may not remember or know Kayla and Beanick and some of our projects. And then we're going to go from there, and we're going to get into more specifics about your project and some of our thoughts and questions and a lot of things that we'll continue to address. So East Hampton Public Safety Complex, you're familiar with that nearby. That was actually constructed for about $6 million. So it's been a few years, but you can see how inflation has changed things. Hampton, New Hampshire Fire Rescue, Beach District, We actually did 2 stations there. The Beach District was new, and then there was additions and renovations to their main headquarters. West Boylston Police Station, that's probably 3 years old at this point. Ashburnham Public Safety Complex, it houses both the police and fire. A town not unlike Southampton with the demographics and size of the community and the size of the forces. North Hadley Fire Station, that's probably 2 years old at this point. They wanted a fire station in the north section of town, and they've actually asked us to come back now to look at their existing public safety complex. John was principal in charge of that. I'm going to turn it over to Jim now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Hannafin, again, one of the principals at Kalo and Bienick Associates. We've done, as you've seen in our packet and some of the information that Curtis has shared, quite a few public safety complex projects. A lot of combined public safety facilities, a lot of standalone police, a lot of standalone fire. We've done renovations to buildings, additions, and as you can see, brand new buildings. What this gives us is quite a bit of an experience and knowledge on how to construct, how to design, how to put together these type of facilities. Things that we look for is how to get the most out of your facility, such as how can we incorporate training into a facility, into the spaces that you're going to use every day. For example, in the fire department, can we make areas that can use for ladder training, hose training, climbing training, confined space type training that could be built into stair towers? How do we set up systems such as HVAC and the control of how air and ventilation is done through your buildings? We have to balance energy code and energy management through the systems. We don't want, you're potentially bringing in contaminants from outside sources, emergencies, and we want to make sure we control how that is handled in the facility. We want to handle office space that's used 24/7 differently than some spaces such as apparatus space that won't be occupied and don't need to be heated and cooled the same way. So again, how do we look at everything? On the police side, we're very knowledgeable. We have a lot of experience on evidence handling. The chain of custody is very, very important, how you handle. We meet with you to understand how you need to do that, what kind of area we need to provide, and we make recommendations on the best way that we've seen each department, other departments, other cities, towns, large, small, handle those things. We've done several evidence processing labs. How do we move materials, evidence through the building? How do we make sure everything is safe, secure, on cameras, logged, tracked? And obviously detainee areas, processing. What do you do? How do you handle that? What's the best way to handle those? Are there ways to combine facilities, combine rooms that we don't have to build standalone every time, but they can serve different functions? All that's in compliance with the state. All of the cells, your booking areas approved by DPH. So we understand your tasks. It was very clear in your RFQ. Space needs assessment is where we would start. From there, that's where we would meet with the committee, with each department, and go space by space. We would go through your buildings today, the way you operate, your staffing, your equipment, everything, and develop what you see on the right-hand side, Excel spreadsheets. It's a beautiful building on paper. All it is numbers. What size area do you need for space? How many officers will be in each department? What do you foresee for growth? What do we recommend that you would, how to go growth for the future? We look at, are we looking at a 2-story building, a 1-story building, the pros and cons of both, and what the space implications are for that. And again, we target everything from your personnel, your current personnel, to your future, what we see or expect, and as well as your equipment. In part of that process, we look at population demographics. Where's the growth? What are you seeing your calls increasing on? EMS is likely the one growing. Aging society, those are where most of the calls seem to be coming from. Where are the areas in your town that are growing or are going to be more densely populated? Projecting, what's the best site? Where's an area that might be the most beneficial? What other spaces are you planning to have in there? Community use. It's a public safety complex. We can show you designs where you can have public spaces, but yet still maintain a full, secure building for both police and fire. How do we mass the building? How do we make it look like a Southampton building, something that'll fit into your area? We go through your hierarchy of each department, from chiefs to captains to patrols, same thing on the fire, who are systems, who are sworn officers, who are public staff. We'll get to understand all of that. We'll make recommendations based on what we've seen other cities and towns doing. And again, the whole purpose of a public safety complex. What can we share? What space can be used be combined with each facility? We want to maximize multi-use space to reduce the amount of area that you have to build. It's pointless to build a big meeting space that's only used once a day or once a week. We want to make sure we can maximize the uses and enroll other functions into that space. From there, we develop schematic designs. This is a quick layout of how things might fit together. This is the Lennox Public Safety Complex, which we're currently doing some work on. Blue is fire. The red or rose is, I'm sorry, I got that backwards. Red or rose is fire, blue is police, and the green is shared. We need to learn. We need to learn what areas that might be beneficial for each department can share. Obviously, mechanical systems and the way the building functions, those are all important things that we can maximize being shared, but can fitness rooms, can community space, public toilet rooms, and then maintain security. So you come into this public lobby, we want it to be warm, welcoming. It's use, your townspeople paid for it. We want them to be welcome in there. At the same time, you have to have level of security. How do we let people through and come in and conduct their business? At the same time all this is going on, we know you have a number of sites. Here's an example. We look at what are the buildable area of the sites. There's few perfect sites around anymore, but what do we have to work with? Are there wetlands that are going to be challenges or restrictions? This particular project has a conservation restriction. What are the elevations? What are the flat areas that are most buildable? Are there rock outcroppings? Public safety, fire needs setbacks. You can't roll out of the apparatus bay on a curve. We want to make sure we hit all of those answers as we're addressing the site. And that tells us key items on the building design. 1 story, 2 story, how do we fit that? Again, just using Lennox as an example, you can see the blue areas we got to stay out of. They're wetlands, it's a vernal pool. We could identify areas that best fit the building, how to fit stormwater management, generators, aerial towers, all within setbacks, so we can keep moving the project forward. We not only look at the overall building and the rooms, but again, what are the other configurations? You can see on the top left, one's a 1-story option, one's a 2-story option. But we also narrow in on individual rooms. The bottom left image is the community room, is actually for the UMass police station. That space serves 3 different functions. It's community space where the students can come in and use it, police meeting area, roll call briefing type area, but it's also their EOC, so Emergency Operations Center. It was designed so it has exterior access, additional, all the data communication requirements, and it's off the lobby, so it can be controlled at certain times, but again, any department can come in and use it, all while maintaining security. You can't get into the police department from that area unless you're allowed, unless it's, unless access is granted.
So I get the pleasure of talking a little bit about sites, all right? You have 4 sites that have been identified. I'm going to start with one that I have a little bit of familiarity with, going back to 2014. Here's some early analysis of that site. At the time, of the sites that were available at that time, that ended up being the preferred site. And it came with a lot of challenges, which drove costs, and as you all remember. But some of the things about 204 College Highway, it's centrally located. It's good for response times. NFPA, it's acceptable to NFPA. It's town-owned. That was critical at that time. It meets the planning and zoning. But the cautions were the site development cost, infrastructure, septic system, topography, access to the driveway. I mean, right now, you've got seniors coming in and anybody coming to town hall, and they're potentially fighting against responding apparatus coming out of the fire station. It's not a preferred situation, so those were one of the things that we wanted to try and address when we were working on that site for the project. There's wetlands and flood zone. The good thing is a minimal impact to the current traffic patterns on College Highway and ability to address the current unsafe site circulation, i.e. the folks coming in while apparatus is coming out. I mean, that was really clearly a priority. But like I said, at the time of the sites that were available, that was the best. Technically possible to do, just costly when you start developing infrastructure. So we looked at numerous options. By the spring of 2015, we had an option that was cited and trying to respect, it had to be terraced because of the slope and all the other concerns. And lo and behold, as we presented this plan and started talking with people, we realized and were informed that the current fire station has it's a historic structure. It's been here for a long time. Now, it's been compromised through the years, but that particular solution was not going to be acceptable, for that reason primarily. So, we continued to look at things and develop different options. There was an option where we basically positioned the facility behind it and worked. In that case, you can see the flanking wings that were not original to the original schoolhouse had been removed, and we thought, well, maybe that could be used for some other function, whether it's a meeting room for the town, whether it's something to support the public safety complex, and maybe make that an outbuilding. So there were a lot of things going on at the time as we looked at potential solutions. This one you can see is E2, and I'm sure there's probably a dozen between B and E2, but iterations, and ultimately it slid a little bit forward. It was costly to develop retaining walls and address those things. Technically possible, but so anyway, that particular site I know it's still on the table, and those are all things we'll need to consider if we were to consider that site for this project now. So jumping over to Clark Street, two parcels, I put them together. They're right next to one another. They're nice parcels. They have a little bit of slope. I did listen to the senior center presentation by Abacus, and he did a good job describing the various sites. I understand it's kind of a shared pool between the two projects on who gets well, there's going to have to be a meeting of the minds on who gets which site, and perhaps, I'll say. But anyway, so there's a lot of positives about those sites. Certainly not as challenging from a topography standpoint, but privately owned, so there's land acquisition costs, things like that have to be considered. There's some pocketed wetlands on 89 Clark. There's an easement on the left side there. 79 Clark, it's a little bit narrow up front for what we would typically want a public safety facility to consist of, because it's more than just the building up front, it's the ability to work around it. An apparatus takes a lot of space, and so, pros and cons. But digging a little bit further on those two sites, we found that both of them are considered a protected habitat. And so what that involves, we're going to have to dig a little further and find out, is it a salamander, a turtle, or a vegetated, a plant, a rare plant. That's what killed one of the sites in Lenox. There were several sites that were considered in the Lenox public safety. Jim can discuss that later on. But the one that was the most obvious, like that's where we want it. It's perfect. It's near the hotel. It was perfect. except for a protected habitat, which just destroyed the site. So it's like, all right, move on to site 2, and that's the one that Jim showed you a short while ago. But all things we need to consider. The perk was described here, or the ability to perk, as okay. I noticed that when they described it in the senior center presentation. Jumping off to Zero College Highway, the soils up there are a little bit better and more conducive to that. It's also a flat site, or a flatter site, much flatter, which is desirable when you're moving big apparatus around and you want to do some training. This is actually from 2017. We were asked to just see if a footprint of the original study might work on that site somewhere, somehow. So they had asked us to look at it. We said, okay, well, there's a commercial zone along College Highway. Everything behind it, we don't know, but we figured we need about 3.5 acres at least for an adequate public safety complex. So we used a footprint and kind of flipped it and mirrored it from some of the original studies, and to see how might that work. And of course, we said, well, we don't want a long driveway coming in that could be blocked, kind of repeating a little bit of what we have right now. Ideally, when we have public safety complexes and we're designing them, we'd like to have 2 ways in and out so that it can't be blocked. So that was one of the things, and we said, well, perhaps a future roadway might loop around and connect on Lynn Drive. But at that time, it was all speculative. Here was, this was actually, like I say, this is a mirror flip image of some of the things we were looking at for the original site a couple of years prior to that. But, so now, Zero College Highway. Planning Board currently has this preliminary subdivision plan in front of them. Interesting, they still show the commercial, and it's pretty close to what we were projecting at the time. So, we're pleased that they've left that area that was designated as a test fit for a public safety complex. Looks like they're considering leaving that, which was a good thing. Privately owned, might be land acquisition costs, but anyway, you've got water on all these sites. You've got town water, so that's a good thing. Great thing. The challenge is the septic. So, how do you pick between them? Well, ultimately, we're going to have to rank them somehow. But, back in 2012, there was a report to the Board of Selectmen from Public Safety Complex Committee. I think it was before you guys, maybe some of you were on that committee, but you can see they were looking at the response times for the apparatus. That's key. You want to be able to get there and respond to emergencies. So the mapping on the right is we pulled that right out of it, and I just dropped the sites on it. On the left, you can see a little bit of the population density of the town. While the far west, it looks like, well, wait a minute, we can't get there. Well, up at the reservoir, there isn't much to protect, I guess. There are some homes up that direction, but certainly the population density down around Paisanos and, Pomeroy Meadow in that area, and working this way from that south. So how do we evaluate sites? You're going to be looking at some of the things I talked about previously: available infrastructure, topography, perk rates, since you're going to need to handle the sanitary, and we're also not going to be able to introduce things from the building. Fire department, floor drains, things like that are not going to go into that septic because it can't technically. We've done it many times and has to have a tight tank on the side, but we'll get into the technical aspects later on, hopefully. But so how do you do it? So you look at each of the sites, you start ranking them, and you say, all right, well, that one's that's a 5 out of 10. And so you take there's a little bit of subjectivity to all of that, and you apply it to each of the sites that you're considering. And at that point, you can take this data and put it all on one chart and create a matrix. I know that was one of the tasks, and the deliverables in one of the tasks. So instead of just giving you a score, we can put it, we can consolidate it and boil it down further than that so that it's easy to identify the priority sites. I am going to hand off to John at this point. I'm sorry?
Which area do you hit? Which is spacebar?
Spacebar.
Okay. Good evening. John McMillan, principal with Caleb Bienick. To explain, we're going to show you some examples of some projects and how we control cost in those projects. I know we're running short, so I'll fortunately talk a little quicker. This is the UMass facility. This was the first LEED Gold facility for the university. All of these projects you're going to see went through the same process as yours. Feasibility study, programming, conceptual design, site selection. Actually, there was 5 sites reviewed for this particular project before they settled on this particular site, and through design and construction. One of the ways this had low change order rate, and one of the ways we maintain a low change order rate on all of our projects is working with consecutive consultants. We know each other very well. We've worked together quite often. Our team here is the same team on other public safety projects that we've done. And the other way is simply review. Review and coordinate the projects in multiple steps, review again, and review 10 times before you put it out to bid. I mean, you do pick up a lot, and you do reduce the change orders in the process. We mentioned this project before. This, again, was a LEED Gold, and this also included the same process through programming, design, and construction. For the town of Williamstown, so sorry, make sure I get the right town, this project was done on a very cost-effective basis. This was actually an addition and renovation to an existing residence, actually an old VA home. This project goes through the same process your town will, and most of our projects through town meeting. So we bring a project to town meeting, we sort of market it, we go through the explanation of the project, the development of the project, we show why the project's necessary. You must demonstrate need to get a positive vote at town meeting, and we go through that process. And the project you see, obviously, we've been successful, and we're very successful in, and have been very successful in our town meeting process. In the town of Ashburton, again, Curtis said this is a very similar sized town. This project was actually bid in 2 phases. There was an early site work package, and then the main building. There was a lot of site work on this particular project. One of the ways we reduce costs in this particular project is in the back of the building where the fire apparatus is. The fire apparatus is actually built out of a pre-engineered metal building. You have large clear spans. It's low dollars per square foot or lower dollars per square foot than most construction options are available, so you can save some money in that particular area. And particularly if you're in a residential area, if you put it behind the building, it's not something that's front and center to the public. This is Northfield. This is a project that is actually out to bid right now. We just received the file sub-bids last week. Gratefully, we're about 4% under with about 50% of the project bid. This is a project we took through study, feasibility, planning, and now have a town meeting 2 weeks from now, after we receive the general bids, where we're asking for basically $11.5 million for about an 18,000 square foot facility. And this happens to be the site for that particular project, Northfield. Similarly, you can see the fire in rose, the common spaces in yellow, the police in blue. A lot of the building design are site-specific. Obviously, if you can design your building in cooperation with the existing site conditions, you can save cost. In this particular project, we had a riverfront, wetlands, state highway, some significant constraints that gave us a little triangular area of upland, about 2 acres. And we're able to fit that with a very narrow office building. And in the back, again, that's a pre-engineered metal building that you basically are not going to be able to see from the road because it steps down, because in addition to everything else, we have steeply sloping grades. But we do keep in mind the site as we develop the project, because the more the building can conform to the site conditions, the less expensive we can make that particular project. Also, we look at during feasibility and certainly during design, we look at options for mechanical electrical systems, trying to reduce the energy cost, the overall energy cost, through different types of mechanical electrical systems. These will be reviewed in detail with you, and you'll get to speak to engineers and ask them questions about which might be best for you. Based upon the program and the missions of the police and fire, we would try to recommend certain types of systems that would go towards your type of occupancy of the building. But we would do that through every system that is available to us. We would look at net zero as an option. We did this in Northfield. We were looking at options to try to electrify the building, if that was an option. We're up there right next to Northfield Electric, and we were hoping from some cooperation. That didn't appear. But we do, and we have in that particular project, tried to future-proof the project. So the building design and the systems are designed so that in the future, you can eventually electrify the buildings, as the trade is principally going towards that direction where you can electrify, and the electrical energy can come from renewable sources. That seems to be the way that people like to proceed with energy conservation. And we do have and we will have on July 1st a new energy code in the state of Massachusetts, the new stretch energy code, you're probably aware, which will increase the energy efficiencies of our building, the energy efficiencies of performance ratings of our mechanical electrical systems. So initially, in our designs, we look to reduce the envelope, the energy load of the building. We can look at active and passive solar systems. And we work to try to create a building where you can get significant payback. Obviously, some of the options that are available to you, you might not ever see a payback, but we're looking for ones that will benefit the town in the short term and the long term. Jim, I think that was 3 minutes, right?
So you've heard a lot of detail about how we go about doing the study and putting the information together, and work with you consistently all through this to put together a good plan, a good schematic, cost estimates, everything together. But one of the most important parts of the project is our service to help you educate your voters, the town, on the need for the project, what it's going to cost, what it's going to include, and what are the features that they can expect. If we can't help you achieve a positive vote, then you're going to have another study. You're going to have another book. So we've been very successful. As you can see, that's a partial list of override or support votes we've had in various cities, towns. For most of them are public safety complexes or police and fire, but we also have done it for schools, libraries, and other building types. So again, we bring a level of experience to way to help you get the information out there. And that's changing every day. Right now, technology is a big piece, as you've already seen in your town. As Curtis mentioned, we watched the Senior Center YouTube video. That was great, gets the information out there. We would recommend we would do the same thing with the study. We'd present the graphics, put together a program, get a website going, put the information all there so the town's people can see it and ask questions early. One of the things is to get the questions early. You don't want people to go to a vote and not have an answer or have a doubt on something. We want to go to public meetings and hear the questions, provide answers. If we don't have an answer, so that we can have it when it's asked again. So those are key. We can also present, renderings. You saw models, 3D models. We do those. Project boards that you can leave behind, post in town hall so people walking by can see them. We've done flyers, all different things, a way to get the information out there. Right now, we're doing this for the town of, city of Taunton, large public safety complex, 80,000 square feet. Similar process. We've gone through a study. Now we have to get the voters to understand the need and why they need such a building, and how we laid it out. What are the features? What are the positives? What are the changes they're going to see? One of the things we've done with them is a system on a website. It's public information. We've gone to school senior center meetings to make presentations. And last week we just did a call-in questionnaire. It was interesting. First time we did it, public could call in to a number. We had a panel, not only us as designers, but the mayor, the chief financial officer, the project manager, planner, the people in charge of voting. They were all at the panel, and voters could ask,
And both
chiefs could all answer questions. The public could ask what they wanted, and we could answer it right there, which was very good. Just some of the graphics that we were used to convey the information. And I want to stress the whole reason for public safety. You see the green areas there. Those are shared. Those are the key. We want to demonstrate that you're saving money by doing a public safety complex. Those are spaces you're not building twice. You're not building that space in a separate police station and in a separate fire station. So in the end, why the Kalo and Beanick team? I'll sum it up. We've done over 60 years, not us specifically, but Kalo and Beanick, over 60 years of doing public projects. Our percentage of public is probably 80% in our office. We are well attuned at what you have to put together for Massachusetts residents, for public bidding, and all the procedures, the options, whether it's a 149 standard bid or a CM at risk, we can advise you on that. The people you see here, one of the big things is our commitment. As some of you who are involved in the previous study, you saw Curtis all the time. We're principals, we're owners of the company. We're here, you're gonna see us all the way through. We don't pass it off to someone else. We're local, we're 30 minutes away at the most, and we attend the meetings. We're here for you. Any questions come up, you can call one of us, we'll have answers. It's not a different group during design, a different group during bidding, a different group during construction. You're gonna have one of the owners, one of the principals involved all the way through. And you saw the list. We have experience in all the sectors. Again, separate police, separate fire, combined, new, renovation. We bring experience in all different levels, all different size projects. And the big thing we pride on, we're architects. We want to design a building for you that meets your needs. We're not giving you a project or building that we've done somewhere else and features that are already, we know we have or done somewhere, but it's going to reflect around the department's needs. It's not going to be something, we're not going to push image items on you or design techniques. We're going to get the information from you, present schematic designs, present options. As Curtis said, some of those were A through E. You're going to see all those and have input. Yeah, I like that. I don't like that. And we go back and we work from there. That's about everything we had. Welcome. If we have any questions, we'll try to answer them.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have prepared questions that I'm going to read. And I will skip over those, or I will ask if it's okay to skip over those which we think have already been answered. So the first is, how often would you expect to meet with the Public Safety Committee during the feasibility study? How many site visits?
You have to come up. To the mic.
You have to come to the...
Just probably hold it right to your chin, Curtis.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The short answer is as many times as we're needed. I mean, if it's weekly, if it's bi-weekly, and it's going to depend on the phase of the project. At a certain point, we have to be able to sit and work and work with our staff and the consulting team in order to do that. But we're here. I mean, if it takes stopping in on the way to work in the morning at 7:30, and having a coffee and going over a few things, that's fine. It's, we are here, we're available. So as many times as necessary.
It's a very iterative process. So every step and stage that we take with some of the participants, we bring it back to the committee to review it in whole, because the entire committee needs to know where we're at and give us permission to proceed from task to task.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions? All right, onward. What steps will you take to determine the best size and design for a public safety building in Southampton?
So, again, as we said, we will meet with each department. We try to gain, get an understanding of what you have today and what are the space challenges you have, what would be the preferred way to have a building design laid out. We developed what I called the building program. That was an Excel sheet for what you currently have, what needs needed minimum, and then we add the factors for future. What are the future offices you might need, future staffing, future equipment that should be planning for. Again, we try to target these buildings for a 30s, if not 50-year growth period. In the design of the buildings too, we also try to situate the buildings so you can do additions. You're not try to avoid landlocking any one side of a building that you couldn't add on an apparatus bay or build on more space, say 50 years down the road. We don't want to design something that's, roof lines that won't work down the road. And we, as John said, we bring it back to the committee. We gain an understanding. Sure, sometimes people ask for more space is needed. We will give you our professional opinion if it's on track or if items make sense.
And whether it's a one-story or a two-story building, those types of things, there's a lot of things that will drive that. But typically, a two-story solution, you're buying elevators and extra circulation stairs and those types of things, that a small department where you're wearing many hats, you don't want to have to be going up and down each time to address those needs. So our initial recommendation, and I guess if there's a bias, it just from a functional standpoint, that was off. Sorry. Our initial take on it for a department of your size would be to try and keep it on one level. You can zone that level, but not get into a vertical arrangement. Sometimes it's required.
Sorry, getting three answers here. We would use our experience also, because obviously between us, and it's kind of scary, we have over 100 years of public safety experience in Massachusetts. So we've seen a lot of department issues. We've resolved a lot of department issues in other projects. I think we would be able to understand the specifics of your individual departments, and I believe we could, use our experience to devise the best solution possible based on particular sites.
Alua? Yeah, I have a question. Could you just address a little bit more when you discuss size and square footage? I was noticing that one building that you mentioned, the population was 2958. It was 18,000 square foot building for 11 million. So would you say that the square footage is in direct relation to the population of the town? Is it related to the programming that the departments say that they need? Just because square footage is money, and I'm just wondering what goes into your decisions around, or recommendations around square footage.
I'll start. Some of those facilities, you might be talking about a town that has substations, so looking at one station or one public safety might be smaller in a larger population because there's an existing substation. So there's not a direct correlation in every single case. And I would say early on, I used to think there was, but more and more I'm thinking there's not. Within each department, there could be EMS, or EMS could be separate and other, a separate facility or a separate service. So there's not too often where you have apples for apples. But generally speaking, obviously, we would expect the largest town populations to have larger facilities. Typically, that goes along with the equipment and the men and the staffing of each department.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I'll give you an example. You're close enough that for detention, I believe you still use the House of Correction, the Hampshire County?
When it's convenient.
Right. So, you have that opportunity, I'll say. Some other more rural, remote towns that might be the same size might not have the jail nearby, so they can't rely on that. Dispatch is another one. Do they do dispatch internally? Does the state police handle it? Whether it's shared? All of those things will factor in. So, one rule of thumb isn't going to be there. It's got to be the specifics of how Southampton works, not Ashburnham or Northfield or Williamstown or Lenox.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have one follow-up.
Sure.
Some of the time, we've done some touring of stations, and one of the concerns... We've done some touring of stations, and one of the concerns that we'd had, or that we'd seen and were identified, were like spaces, voids that were underutilized. Is there actually a step in the process where you kind of look at the overall design once you have it to utilize some of those void spaces?
So as part of the study, we'll put together what we call data sheets, which is literally a spreadsheet or line item of everything that's going to happen in that room. And as they're trying to mention or cover, we want to look at what functions can we put into each of those spaces. Not just one, can we use that space to serve 2 or 3 functions? Again, I use the example of community room, but briefing rooms, can they be used as training? Can they be as seminars? One of the projects you guys were talking about space, one of the chiefs wanted a sloped training floor. Well, that's great for training, but it's not good for anything else. So when you're not training, it doesn't make sense.
And I guess I mentioned it just because I know we're short on time, like Hadley, where they had just a situation in their present station where they had a lot of underutilized space that they ended up, making their own doorways into void areas so that they had closet space. I know you designed their second station.
You're talking about
Their main station, yeah.
That's the one John's doing the study.
And just,
I talked to the chief, and I've talked to the chief, and I've given him a proposal to go through that with determination of what are the deficiencies in the building, how can those deficiencies be improved, repaired, and what additions do they need to make their current program. So we've done that. That wasn't our particular design to start with, but we've seen it in other facilities. As far as our design principle goes, and typically it's 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag.
Yep, which is what we're looking for. Thank you.
We passed over the next several as already having been answered. For the next 4 questions, does the committee want to raise those questions before I move on to?
I think we've already they've responded.
I'd say pass over it.
All right. So I'll move on to discuss examples of past projects where a rural community had to vacate a fire station and/or police station, and the public wanted answers to what would happen to an old structure, assuming the new public safety building was proposed for a new location.
Can you say that question a different way?
I want to know what you're going to do with the old buildings, and how do you address that? And yes, we've seen that to varying degrees with public safety. We see it with schools, town halls, libraries. It doesn't matter what. They say, well, you're going to move out. What are we going to do with that? Well, typically that's not within our scope of this. We can help you with some suggestions, but we can't tell you how much it's going to cost to renovate it because we don't know if it's going to be a restaurant, a senior center, fill in the blanks sometimes. But yes, we have to add that. And I go back to Ashburnham when I smile because they were moving out of the fire station, and fortunately, it burned down. Or the building it was adjacent to burned down, so that kind of answered their question. They were able to keep the apparatus and move that around. But it's hard to give an answer to an unknown, I suppose.
So an example is we just did this for the town of Lenox as part of our service they're building new public safety. Looked at the existing 2-bay fire station. It's their headquarters. It's a very small building. We can't, as Curtis said, we don't know what's going in there, so you can't nail everything down and tell them what's going on. But we give them an overall review of what they need in code updates. There's no elevator, there's only one stair, it doesn't have sprinklers, it doesn't have fire alarm. So those are things we were able to identify. And then in secondary, we said, what are the maintenance issues that you need to do? It needed repointing, it needed new windows, the boiler was old. So we're able to give a list of things that had to get redone, no matter what you put in there. And then, so that gave them an idea of what kind of cost they'd be looking at to let somebody else and to move someone else in there, or is it worth trying to sell the property? It's kind of an odd. Could they do that? It's literally 10 feet away from the town hall. It looks just like it, so I don't know how that would work, but those were how we could set it up. And until they told us who's going to move in, you can't be down to the penny on the code items and the renovation costs.
Sorry, another three-parter. Another specific example is the fire station for the town of Belchertown. We constructed that building probably within 6 feet of the existing fire station. We knew the fire station couldn't stay there after the building was built, so it was picked up and moved down the street and became a museum. So that was a historical structure that was saved that way. In the town of Hamilton, we did a public safety facility directly behind an existing public safety building. It was not historical, it was not particularly worth saving, and it had to come down in order to complete the site work for the public safety. That's on a very tight site.
Are we set to move on? All right, so let's see. Do we want to pass on to the last question, or shall I ask this next one, committee?
That's the last question.
All right.
I'm pretty much satisfied in mine.
All right, so the last one was the one that you received from Ed, and that is, what is your anticipated fee range for the feasibility study?
Notice how quickly they ran away from that one. I did respond to Mr. Gibson's and provided a letter. And basically I said, similar to what Jim just alluded to, there's a lot of different moving parts in these projects. And until the actual scope is perfectly defined, how much of the existing information from the senior center project can we reuse, or does it need to be enhanced, or are they picking up the cost for certain things? And so it's hard for us to assign those numbers, and as well ask our consultants, say, well, give me a price to do a project. So I did come up with a range. I'm not sure, should I be revealing the range or what? And it's a wide range, so it's one you can't miss with, right? But I believe I said 85 to 135 or something. And you're going to say, well, wow, that's pretty wide. Well, sure, but there's certain things about these sites that are going to, I'll say, be obvious early on. How long do you want to beat a dead horse sometimes to try and find out something that's obvious? We can give a study that's that thick that does beat the horse multiple times, or it might be a little bit thinner because, I don't know what example to use, but if it's obvious it's not going to work on a site, I'll just say if it was bedrock and it was like this, and it's all right, it's not good for public safety, let's go away from that site. If you're asking for personal, I'll stay away from personal opinions on the sites right now. I could offer some thoughts, but anyway, I don't know that I answered that question, but we gave a range, and I don't know what the number is. It's just based on experience many times. Things like, it's part of the due diligence process, but water pressure, it's great. At least you guys have water, And I often say, people say, well, how come it costs us so much? We're a rural community. Yeah, I get it. But piling bricks on top of one another, or maybe it's not bricks, but just as an example, isn't any cheaper in Southampton than it is in Westfield, okay? It's the same brick being stacked on top of one another, right? They're the same prevailing wages, but where their cost per square foot, they say, well, how come mine's so high? Because you're creating infrastructure, and that's really what we're trying to get a site that's good. The actual building is, I don't want to say it's not magic. I mean, you need to understand what's going on there. but it applies to all communities. It's all those variables that you can't answer. So I think I just talked in a circle for about 5 minutes, and I hope I answered the question.
Well, of necessity, I think, because we understand that the price will be negotiated depending on what the scope of work ends up being. Thank you.
I wasn't really sure how much, how in-depth the site analysis had been for the senior center. I heard discussions of, the perk seems better or is okay, and that might be, is that founded on somebody digging a hole, somebody doing a perk? Was it just understanding the soils? The soils at Zero Cottage, of the 4 sites, are probably the preferred from a perk perspective. I know that because in 2017, I sold the whole thing done. It's an attractive site, I'll just say that, but I'm not going to say.
We had agreed that the senior center feasibility study was going to be the property of Southampton, so the information in it is available for people to use and have when it is published. And so that's, I wouldn't want anybody to recreate the wheel if it's not necessary, and we tried very hard in that study to use objective data and not use a lot of opinions. That being said, the sites have not been perked as of now. It's based on past data.
Okay, and that's helpful. And as I said in the letter, and I know you have, I think, a May 17th deadline to try and complete the study for the senior center. But, our recommendation, you can see the way we set up our schedule would be, that site selection exercise is going, even though it's identified as task 2 or 3, whatever the number was, right? It's going on simultaneously with the other early tasks, so that we can holistically make the right selections, not only, from public safety, but from a senior center perspective. Which one works better? Which ones, I like the idea of weighing an opinion again on the senior center, the ability to connect with Coleman Park, hey, I'm there watching my grandkids, all of those things. That sounded appealing. It's probably left. I don't know why it's not. Sorry. I like that connection. The ability to connect with the park, I'll say, is probably less critical from a public safety perspective. All right? So when you start weighing and putting a matrix together, maybe the matrix isn't just the public safety, and maybe the matrix isn't just the senior center. We're talking about the same sites. Maybe that matrix needs to be combined so that we somehow, and we'd be available to work with that designer and your stakeholders in order to create that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I actually have 2 questions. One is, you've made reference to knowing the sites, knowing the town. Let me finish. You've done a lot of work already in the past, working with the previous committee, but it didn't pass. What's different about your firm now? Well, I'm new too. You didn't have me before, but why didn't it pass, in your opinion?
I don't know that it was how the message is, what the message was. In my opinion, obviously everybody votes with their pocketbooks. And 9 years ago, folks said, well, that's a lot of money, and I can build whatever for half that price. And that's great. At the time, we had 4 sites. It was a process with the committee, and one of the sites was the DPW garage, right? Well, sure, let's move it to the DPW garage, but first we have to move them out. So now we need 2 projects rather than 1. So that's how some of the site selection was winnowed down back then. I think that while technically possible, And while it was the preferred site of those that were available at the time, I think you got a better menu to pick from this time.
Okay.
And that's, and I really think that can make a big difference. And we have a pretty high success rate with passing. It doesn't make us feel good to lose a project either. It was heart-wrenching, but
Okay, and the second question is, at this point tonight, do you have any questions for us? The committee, well.
No, obviously, your schedule identifies April 28th is a start date. When do you think you'll be making a decision?
That's one question, is when will we make a decision? I think we have to, it's by our schedule. I don't have an answer for that right now.
But, if in fact, getting us on board, or whomever on board now, earlier rather than later, would be beneficial to work with the seniors' decision-making, we're ready to go. Let's put it that way. It's just, we have some familiarity with your facilities, some of the deficiencies. We didn't bore you with pictures of things you've already seen. We did talk about chain of custody and things like that. So it's impossible to keep in your present. Keep well. You do well, but you're playing the cards you got. There's only so much space for apparatus in that existing fire station. And you only have 2 feet between the brick wall and the fire truck. Yeah, it fits, but not really. You'll have one accident in that facility. And the people, the public needs to be aware of it. We tried last time to do that. Maybe we need to do a better job at getting that message out there more often. Like I say, one accident where something, God forbid, were to happen between that brick wall and that fire truck, and all the questions of, that's a $10 million project. It's 10 million 10 years ago. Those questions are out the window. So again, I don't know that I answered the question, but we're excited to work with you again and work with this group for a lot of new faces that we didn't work with in the past. But we're always trying to sharpen our game.
Thank you. And our time is up. Are there any further questions just as we close? We thank you very much for making the presentation and for all of the good information. Thank you.
They have a mind of their own.
Thank you very much.
Are we going to take a couple of minutes and then reconvene, or is that what you're going to do?
Well, it wasn't posted that we were reconvening.
Okay, so we're all going to reconvene on the 10th then?
No, stay.
Okay.
It's not posted as any deliberation.
So no deliberation was posted. Okay. So,
nice to meet you.
See you again.
Good to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Good to meet you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
What do you mean old?
Familiar.
We'll be
Better singing than
I think Lucy will be happy that hanging out here.
So our next meeting will be April 10th at 4:30, up second floor room, and it will be posted that it will be a joint meeting, a joint Zoom in-person meeting.
We can do a hybrid.
For deliberation.
Yes, for deliberations regarding today's meeting.
And prepping for the select board presentation.
And that's fine.
And so
I just want to make sure it's posted.
the part, I mean, it's, for all intents and purposes, it's a in-person meeting, but we're posting it also as a Zoom in the event that somebody can't make it, or there's a snowstorm or something like that.
That's correct.
We had 2 select board meetings that were canceled because we didn't post it as Zoom, and there were snowstorms. So we're just going to be really safe than sorry, because we're on the agenda also for the 11th, I believe, for the select board.
The 11th is the
So
select
we
board.
we definitely don't want to not have the meeting on the 10th.
Correct. So for tonight, May
4:30?
4:30, second floor, as usual.
Same time, same place.
Yes.
Thank you, folks.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
good night.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye. Thanks, Christina.
You're welcome.
you.